All right, Houston, we have to talk because this whole situation is going to get more and more complicated as we approach free agency, OTAs, and minicamp, if it happens. And, as we get close to training camp and eventually the 2021 NFL season. But that's far away. However, free agency is approaching, so we got to discuss this. Okay, so we all know about the situation regarding Deshaun Watson and the Texans organization. It seems Deshaun Watson is done with Houston. He wants to be traded. He no longer wants to play for them. And he has a couple teams that he's willing to play for. We're hearing about all these reports about, I believe the Jets was one of the teams that he'd be willing to play for. So we know Deshaun is most likely looking to get out of there. But again, it really comes down to the organization specifically. I'm sure other teams are already trying to get in contact with them and offer up some sort of deal if they're able to try and get Deshaun Watson. But it really, again, comes down to the Texans organization being willing to listen to any phone calls and actually try to work up some sort of deal. Well, it doesn't really seem like that's the direction the Texans are taking right now, because they have come out and basically expressed that they are not looking to trade Deshaun Watson anytime soon. They want to keep their quarterback, and they're hoping they can come to some sort of agreement with Deshaun Watson and get him to reconsider his specific position. So, yeah, that's kind of where the issue comes in. This situation is going to get a lot more complicated as we approach, the 2021 NFL season. And it, depending on how Watson feels about the situation and how much he's willing to actually sacrifice in order to stand his ground to get what he wants, the Texans could be in a tough position. After all, they don't have a first or a second round draft pick, so they can't really get anything in this draft. So it's tough for them. It's definitely tough for them, because if Deshaun Watson decides I'm just not going to play, he's going to be fine. But again, it's going to be tough on them more than him. If he decides just not to play for the rest of his contract, which I don't think is going to happen, and the Texans stand tall and they're not going to break, then he can, at the end of the day, he's going to lose out on millions of dollars that he's not going to get back. But if he's willing to go through that in order to leave Houston, what can you say? Not to mention, as soon as he's a free agent, somebody is going to sign him. So this is where the trouble comes in. Now look, Houston, I understand, Deshaun Watson is the greatest quarterback in your franchise history. Talent like his doesn't come up often, and it's not easy to draft a guy like this. So losing out on him, the face of your franchise, it's going to be done right now. Not to mention, you guys have nothing left besides him. DeAndre Hopkins, you guys traded him to the Cardinals when you didn't have to. J.J. Watt, you released him. Pretty much all the cornerstones of your franchise are gone. So if you lose Deshaun Watson, who's the face of your franchise right now, and supposedly your future, you trade him, you're done. You have nothing left. You're going back to the dark ages. So I see why they don't want to trade this guy. They don't want to lose Deshaun Watson. They don't want to have to completely restart, especially after everything that's happened. So it makes sense. And I'm not telling the Texans that they have to trade Deshaun Watson, but they have to think of their options here. If Watson is willing to play hardball and he decides he's not going to play this upcoming season, that's going to be tough. That's going to be tough. He, depending on how dedicated he is in wanting to get out of Houston, he may say, listen, I'm not going to training camp. I'm not showing up for any OTAs. I'm not showing up for nothing. And I'm not playing this season until you trade me. That could very well happen. I'm not 100% sure. I'll see. We'll see. We'll see how dedicated Watson is if the Texans let this drag on to training camp, which isn't for months now. We'll pick up on that back in July. We'll wait till July. When we get to July, if this situation is still dealing with that, hey, it is what it is. And I'm not saying the Texans have to trade Deshaun Watson, okay? If everything actually ends up working out, maybe they have a sit down with Deshaun Watson and his agent and they work something out in terms of giving him more power and influence in the team. Just willing to accept any demands that he's giving them. If they could somehow work out something, maybe they can convince him to stay. But if he's dedicated to not wanting to leave Houston, you might have to think about your options, especially because this offseason, specifically this free agency, a lot of quarterbacks are going to be moving. Now, of course, the quarterbacks that are going to be moving don't have the talent of Deshaun Watson. It's just not there. But you have to think about your options. If nothing can come out of this and there's no deal that can be worked and Deshaun Watson wants to leave, it's going to be very tough on you if you guys choose to play the long game and you just, let him continue to sit out. He gets fined and he's not playing games. That can hurt you guys. And you're not going to be able to get much from it, considering the fact you guys traded away some draft picks. So, I'm just looking at this long term. Deshaun Watson will definitely make a sacrifice, but at the end of the day, it's going to hurt the Texans more than it hurts Deshaun Watson. So, you might want to expand your options and at least be willing to listen. I'm not saying you have to agree to anything. I'm not saying you got to make a deal, but at least be willing to listen to what other teams offer you. If they're willing to offer you a lot, and I mean a lot, to get Deshaun Watson, you might want to listen. If Miami's willing to offer up some draft picks and Tua, you're going to have to restart if you were to make that deal. But you could see, you wouldn't be completely having to rely on some older quarterback that you could get in free agency, which is still an option, but you at least get this young, talented quarterback that could potentially grow to be great. Now, we already know what Deshaun Watson is. He's already great, and you don't want to lose a guy like him. But if he's not willing to work with you guys at all and is completely in the mindset of, I want to be traded, I don't want to be here, I'll do anything it takes to get me out of Houston, then you might have to consider looking towards a Miami that's got a Tua. And you could work some type of deal to get some draft picks, maybe another player or Tua, to give them Deshaun Watson. You have to think of these type of outcomes. You can't just continue to dismiss and say, we're not looking to trade him. We don't want to hear any trade offers. Deshaun Watson's not going anywhere. Because again, if you're not able to work something out, it's going to be a problem. Also, you can't forget about the option of picking up a quarterback in free agency. And, Cam Newton's going to be a free agent. And if the worst situation does happen and you may end up trading Deshaun Watson, but you don't trade him to somewhere like Miami where you can get to it potentially, then, Cam Newton will be in free agency. You could pick him up to kind of be that quarterback to play for you guys. Now, of course, Cam Newton isn't the same quarterback he was like 6 years ago when he won the MVP and took his team to the Super Bowl. We understand that. But it's not like Cam's completely done. I don't want a lot of people to look at last year's his performance last year in New England. I don't want you to look at that and just assume Cam Newton's done. Because again, the situation he was working with in New England wasn't perfect, and he was coming off of a recovery from an injury. So he was trying to get himself back into playing football, and he was working with arguably the worst weapons in the league. I'm not going to say hard. They definitely were the worst weapons in the league. As a Ravens fan that sees our weapons, New England's just a bit worse. I'm sorry. He was dealing with the worst receiving core in the NFL, and probably just the worst offense in general. It was terrible watching that offense. So again, I'm not going to say Cam's completely done. I think he still has something left in the tank. Hell, if anything, Tom Brady just kind of showed us just how bad New England is right now. Tom Brady went from just looking absolutely old and decrepit at the end of his final year in New England to going to Tampa Bay and ending up winning a Super Bowl. Like, he looked revived. He took him to the Super Bowl and won. So, clearly, New England is in a good place to be right now, at least with his offense and the lack of weapons and stuff. So, Cam Newton could definitely still be an option. I'm not, again, I have to specify this. I'm not saying, Houston, you should trade Deshaun Watson. I'm not saying that. Again, you guys are working on trying to convince this man. If you can sit down with this man and somehow manage to convince him to stay, maybe you give him more influence and power in the coaches. Give him whatever he wants. Whatever, you can have more power to determine coaches. We'll talk to you about bringing free agents here. We may talk to you about giving you more control and draft. Whatever you got to talk about, it's whatever. I mean, again, when it comes to that much power, I'm not sure you want to give that to a player completely. Not all of that power, some, yes. Influencing some of the team's decisions, you want to give that to your franchise guy. You want to at least get his knowledge about it, especially when it comes to drafting, because he's going to be playing with these guys in the offense. So definitely talk to him about that. But coaches, I don't know if you can give a quarterback that much power about coaches. I'm not 100% sure you can do that. But with the Texans, you might want to give that level of power or some influence in that decision. Whatever you've got to do to talk Deshaun Watson into it, talk it. I know that's what you guys are working on right now. So if you could find a way to convince him to stay, great. Well, you don't have to worry about the situation. But if he's still adamant about leaving and he wants to be traded and he's willing to miss training camp and miss practices and not play this season, you guys have to think about your options for your team moving forward in the long run. If it comes down to it, worst comes to worst, you may have to trade Deshaun Watson, and you're going to have to accept that reality. You cannot continue to push this away and pretend like this is a problem pretend that this isn't a problem. This is obviously a problem, but you can't just ignore the problem and just act like it's going to be fixed easily if we just talk to Deshaun Watson. That's not how the situation is going to work. So, Houston, you need to be willing to listen to other teams' possible trade scenarios and what they're willing to offer for Deshaun Watson. You have to be open to the possibility of trading Deshaun Watson. That is not your first move. Your first move is to try and convince this man to stay and work out some agreement that allows him to get some influence and power. The influence and power that he wants, give it to him. But whatever it takes, get this man to stay. That is your first goal. If that doesn't work, worst comes to worst, you're gonna have to trade him, which means you have to be open to that. I'm not saying switch that immediately, but they have to be more open to trading Deshaun Watson. If they continue to ignore all the calls and they ignore the situation and they think this is gonna work out, it's going to get messy as we get closer and closer to the NFL season. Again, maybe they're trying to put Deshaun Watson to the test. Maybe they don't believe he's willing to sit out games next season if he doesn't get traded. Who knows? I don't know. But again, at the end of the day, they have to be willing to expand their options, and they have to be willing to accept the reality or just accept the possibility that you're going to have to trade this guy. So that's really all I got to say about this specifically. It's not much to talk about. We'll continue to monitor the situation as that goes with Houston. You know, I believe they actually released Duke Johnson. So that's another guy they've lost. I just don't. It's getting worse and worse in Houston. But anyway, we'll see what happens with them. This whole Deshaun Watson situation, we're going to continue to monitor that as the months come, and we'll just see what happens with that. I don't know. That being said, that is all I got, and I'm out of here, man. Peace.